Hey everybody, this is Jim from Top Jimi Profiles. Today we're demoing the Top Jimi Lynch Profile Pack for the Kemper Profiler. Time to make some noise. In this pack, we're looking to recreate George Lynch's tones that he got on the early Dokken albums up through the second Lynch Mob album, so 1983 through about 92. This pack was quite challenging to put together. It took a long time, a lot of iterating, trying to find the right rig for each album. He used a different rig on each and every album, and a lot of the details of those rigs is not very well documented. So a lot of trial and error. It's 1983. Don and the boys fly to Germany to record their first album, Breaking the Chains. George is using a 1970 Marshall Super Lead head. So I'm using my trusty 74 Super Lead head. It's bone stock. Sounds amazing. Worked perfectly for this. In front of the amp, the internet says he used a Dallas Arbiter Rangemaster or some kind of treble booster. I can tell you he did not. It sounds absolutely nothing like Breaking the Chains. It sounds like Brian May playing through a Marshall, which is kind of cool, but not what we need. Equalizer pedal doesn't really do what we need. What did do it, what we needed was the Boss OD1 overdrive, which George is also rumored to have used and appeared to have used on the Breaking the Chains album. Hard part was figuring out the speakers. So I tried all my old vintage Celestians. According to the literature online, he used an old Marshall cabinet. Okay, that helps a little bit. It means it's probably a Celestian greenback of some kind. Eventually I figured it out. It was a G12H30 with 55 Hertz cones. So, Breaking the Chains. Fast forward to 1984, Tooth and Nail album. George goes nuts and decides not to use Marshall heads. Instead, he's using Randall RG80 solid-state heads. This is an original example from that period. And in front of the amp, he's using some combination of the OD1 again, equalizer, and an Ibanez tube screamer. I found for the album he used, again, the OD1. For cabinets, George says they use 6 cabinets and a couple dozen microphones or so spread around the studio. Which cabinets? So I'm assuming he probably used the Randall cabinets, which were loaded with G12 65 speakers. So I tried in vain to get the tone using just those speakers. Instead, I had to figure out which speaker to mix in with that one to get the tone. And it turns out it was the standard Marshall cabinet speaker of the era, which was the G12M 25 watt greenback. So if you mix those together just right, you get tooth and nail. 1986, my favorite Dokken album, Under Lock and Key. It's also got my favorite George Lynch tone on it. This is probably his most involved rig that he used in the studio. Centered around a 68, I believe it was, Marshall. My 68 is ill at the moment, so I substituted again the 74. Worked amazing. In front of that, he's now moved to the tube screamer. For cabinets, he actually used Marshall and Laney heads, with Laney heads evidently paired with G12H30 speakers, and the Marshall was evidently paired with a very old Marshall cabinet that had the 20 watt speaker. So that's the Van Halen speaker. The G12H30 is the Iommi speaker. So if you mix those just right, it sounds amazing. You actually don't need the Laney head. The Marshall can drive both of those just fine and sound perfect. And on top of that, last and certainly least, the Fostex X15 4-tracker. I found this barely functioning gem on eBay. But channel 1 mic input does work through to the output, so this was adequate. George liked the sound he was getting using his 4-track with the levels basically maxed out and this thing hitting the rails. So Michael Wagner told him to bring it into the studio, and they ran everything through this before they went to the recorder. The rest is history.
In my dreams, it's still the same. Your love is strong, it still remains. Toss and turn all night in the sheets, but I can't sleep. Night after night, don't
1987, Back for the Attack album. George goes to a simplified rig with just a tube screamer into an early 70s Marshall head into a Marshall cab loaded with 25-watt greenbacks. The key to this tone is the miking, which is very aggressively done with the mic directly in the center of the speaker cone. (1990), George steps out on his own with Lynch Mob. And he actually uses 2 amps to track the rhythm parts. Left channel is the same rig he used on Back for the Attack. So it's a early 70s super lead, tube screamer, 25-watt greenbacks. Right channel is what was then a very new amp, the Soldano SLO 100, into the same cabinet. For leads, people rave about the lead tone on that album. I think people are under the impression that it's the SLO 100, but there's a fantastic video out on YouTube of George, I think, doing an instructional video. But anyway, they're in the studio and George is shredding, looking and sounding just like an absolute rock god at the height of his powers. And then in front of him is the long-haired studio engineer sitting in front of the desk console doing nothing, but he's sitting there grooving, you know, looking cool, right? But anyway, you can see the 2 Soldano heads sitting there, but they're turned off while he's soloing. And what's on is the purple Marshall in the back corner. So lead tone is the Back for the Attack rig.
That's growing in my legs when I'm
So again, thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and we'll see you next time.